So, Mark, lately I've been getting quite a lot of emails and calls from people around the world with a natural question, which is, what makes your turntable different from other turntables? And luckily, we have quite a lot of differences. But I thought it would be a great idea to break it down into some bite-sized chunks, and we can kind of go through our answer in long form, and perhaps begin with the very foundations of the turntable, which is the suspension system.
Okay.
So before we go there, there's a couple things that are obvious to most vinyl enthusiasts. The first thing is that vibrational energy, which we also call resonance, comes from the environment, and it comes from the internal systems of the turntable. But let's begin with the environment. So where does vibrational energy originate from before it comes up the stand and interacts with the turntable?
Okay. Well, if we assume that this mechanism that we're using is a very, very sensitive vibration measuring device, it's actually incredibly sensitive down to the wavelengths of light it can transduce.
Yeah.
So if we look out into the broader market and industry with people who have a similar problem of making fine measurements that would be disturbed by external vibration, they have to create some sort of an insulation or isolation from that source of vibration. Typically, road and ground-borne noise, like trucks and heavy traffic, rail systems, earth-moving works, council workers using jackhammers somewhere, and the ground vibrates the ground, it pulses through the ground, and it comes up through the sensitive measuring equipment. I mean, you and I just recently at that government site with the tensiometer.
Yes.
The road traffic on the Westgate Freeway is disturbing their tensiometer measurements and making them useless.
Yes. Yeah.
So minus K, which we will chat about, is evidence here, is a device that can remove the influence of that ground-borne noise. Then we've got noise in the actual infrastructure in the office or room that we're observing the test in, which was come from air conditioning.
Air conditioning, HVAC
systems, computer servers,
roller doors,
generators, and this is refrigerators.
Yeah.
And if we use the analogy at home, there could be a noisy footsteps on a wooden floor, but also on a concrete floor. You can also create vibrations that are measurable. So those are the sorts of general noise forms, and they're enough to disturb these sensitive measuring devices.
Absolutely.
Like a record player.
And I remember very clearly a few years ago when we were experimenting with different sonic environments, apartments, homes, basements, that we had this app on our phone that measured vibrational energy, and we would sit in a room that felt so still,
quiet,
and we would put the app, the phone on the floor, and there it was. There was vibrational energy happening seemingly randomly that we couldn't feel. So it's obviously there. Now we know that the role of a stylus as it tracks through a groove is to convert the vibrational energy that's coming from its contact with the grooves into an electrical signal. So then I guess any resonance or vibrational energy that exists in that point of space and time that doesn't come from the grooves is going to be modulated by the stylus into the hi-fi system. So you could argue that a purer sound, a sound that gets you closer to the music and only what's on the recording, is achieved as you remove more and more of that vibration.
Well, I mean, years and years ago, you had a system which was high mass,
Yes.
And one of the signatures of that sound was we felt the bass was a little bit on the full side, a little bit overpowering, had a bit of a ponderance to it.
Yes.
So that's what suspension systems, when they're properly designed, remove that signature from the sound.
All right, well, let's begin the journey then by looking at suspension systems that have no suspension system.
Right.
In other words, having a turntable that's not using a suspension system, but it's using other methods.
Okay,
so what would a designer be looking at if that was the choice?
A couple of choices. With no suspension, you go high mass or low mass.
Okay, so very light or very heavy?
Or very heavy. So super heavy, you could build a concrete stand, and you could put a foot of heavy lead on top of it, and maybe make it 10 ton.
Okay. Build it out of tungsten.
Build it out of tungsten, whatever. You can throw as much mass on it.
Okay.
The idea behind that is that the disturbing force would struggle to move it.
Yes.
However, if that solution worked, then every lab that you and I have been in that has a vibration problem, have the same bandwidth.
They'd be putting an electron microscope on a block of concrete.
You'd put it on a block of concrete because it's a done side easier, it's a done side cheaper, and whilst not friendly in moving about, it solves. Yes, it does reduce vibration, but it fails to stop the transmission of low frequency.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you still get a signature to it.
Okay.
The opposite way is to go super light.
Yeah.
And try not to store any of that energy and then delayed release of that energy. And in that case, those large disturbances will move that lighter body, but it tends not to store that energy. But it creates another signature to the sound. So mass is not your enemy. Mass is actually your friend.
Yes.
And if you can decouple that mass, so that you use it to absorb some of that vibration, but you decouple it from the low frequency vibration, then your observance of the signal is going to be cleaner.
Absolutely. So you decided early on during the Helix design to use a suspension system.
Yeah.
So you decided not to go that way of the no suspension system. And there are plenty of turntables today that have no suspension systems, and they sound great. They're fine. Now, the next level for you was looking at things like elastomers, rubbers, and things of that nature. So tell us about your journey.
Well, in the classic sense, you've got the ability to go to a catalogue, Barry Controls. It's now another company name they've been taken over, or Lord Mounts, or any one of those aeronautical related suppliers. They have problems with isolating sensitive equipment inside airplanes or helicopters or anything that's vibrating in boats, etc.
Yes.
So oftentimes you'll see an elastomer or rubber style mount, sometimes a meshed steel mount, but it has a spring to it. And they'll publish some data on that to say, oh, this works particularly well in this particular frequency range. And they tend to peter out around the 3.5 hertz as a natural frequency.
So this is a very interesting point in the conversation, because the natural frequency of something is very key to this discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. So the lower the natural frequency, the better. But I'm sure you'll talk about that in a moment. So how do we define natural frequency?
Okay, natural frequency is something at which, if you were to vibrate the environment that device sits on at that frequency, it would oscillate. Okay. You'll actually see it move. So it's not doing any isolation at that frequency. Okay. So a 3.5, say a Paul Stradine mount, which is an elastomer-based mount, industry leader. That is 3.5 hertz vertical and horizontal.
Yeah.
It's incredibly impressive for a rubber mount. If we wanted to go below that and get to the next best, then you'd look at perhaps an air suspension system,
Yes.
which is an inflated bladder of some description, a bicycle tube,
Yes.
you could use that analogy, and you pump it up with just enough air to make the tube very compliant. And you can get down to around 2 hertz natural frequency with something like that. In exceptional cases, where large ancillary chambers are used to augment the air capacity, they get, I think the lowest I've seen is about 1.2 hertz.
Just getting pretty low.
Again, impressive.
Yeah.
You then would also consider, and they're all passive by the way,
Yes.
that they have to have pumps, they have to have pressure sensors,
Yes.
leveling, auto leveling.
There's a degree of complexity. Yeah, right.
That involves in that. So you've got all that. All systems leak. Even if it's a small leak, they leak.
Yeah.
And so there's got to be reinflated at time to time, and you'll see that the system balance itself out.
Yes.
Like the one in Western Australia.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, very big system on Firestone airbag suspensions, calibrated pressure sensors, computer controlling the logic, pumps kicking in and out.
Yeah.
Complex.
But very effective.
Absolutely.
When an air system is working well, it gets down to 1.2 to 2 hertz, which is very, very good. What about active systems?
Active systems, they've really come on to the market in the last, you could say, 10 years plus, and which is relatively new. They use a voice coil or an actuator, a piezo actuator, like your headphones with noise cancelling. They listen for the disturbing force, and they use a computer to turn it 180 degrees and punch it back against the incoming vibration. So they're trying to fight what they're sensing. There's a slight lag.
They're trying to create an equal and opposite reaction, and
sometimes they go into overdrive where they're actually punching in energy when they shouldn't. And the complex logic control of that, and again, the difficulty is finding out what their true natural frequency is. Sometimes there's hybrid systems which use a spring and an active system together to try and get it low, but typically air suspension systems don't. Active systems don't go as low as air.
Yes.
They tend to sit a little bit higher.
Yes.
There are some hybrid designs that get just below the air system.
Yeah.
And the difficulty is trying to find this information out.
Yes.
And then
it's very ambiguous.
Some of the manufacturers, they're almost like they deliberately obfuscate the information.
No one's reporting the same numbers in the same format for you to compare.
So to compare apples to apples, you have to spend a lot of time breaking the data down. And after we went through that exercise, this passive device from a company called -K in California was actually the one with the lowest natural frequency.
I was just going to say, though, that before we move off the active systems, I have a fair bit of experience with power electronics, active harmonic filters, new power factor correction systems, and they're all using IGBT systems, trying to do the same thing in an electrical system where they're picking up a harmonic disturbance and creating an equal and opposite response to it to nullify it. And one thing that I've realized, and I think it's the same, I would imagine it would be the same for active systems, would be that it would only work perfectly if you're able to respond in real time. Nothing can respond in real time. No. You don't know what is coming at you, so you have to assess it first, measure it, understand it, then create a response to it. And even if you get that down to microseconds, you're still not completely in real time. So my understanding would be, and my listening to active platforms is that they're a great idea.
They do work.
And they work quite well, and they settle really quickly, which I love.
Good settling time.
But I still feel that there's a little bit of noise within the system because you said before going into overdrive because it has such a difficult job to do and it's trying so hard to respond
So it can
quickly.
actually get to the point where it's fighting its own
Exactly.
self-generated vibration.
Exactly, yeah.
And it knows from the computer logic to try and squeeze that and tightly control that down to zero. The thing that attracted me to this technology here is the fact that it is fully passive.
Fully passive, yeah. And that's
so
why
when it's quiet, it's quiet.
Yeah.
Like there is no noise coming from the internals. There's no shunting of valves or anything like that. It is actually a very inert and silent platform in its own right.
Well, I think we can sort of wrap up that discussion there by saying that for anyone who uses an active platform, fantastic. They actually are very, very good. But in terms of your journey personally, as you did research and as you were trying things out, and as we were listening to things,
for the lowest,
you wanted an even lower
frequency, knowing that my isolation, true isolation, kicks in very shortly thereafter, and starts to rapidly accelerate down to minute transmissibility.
All right. Well, look, in our next discussion, we'll talk about how the -K works, but we've just arrived at the -K now. This is what your research and your experience has led you to this device. So tell us about its natural frequency, its performance.
Sure.
And why you chose it.
Well, by reference, hundreds of laboratories, engineering firms with the most challenging vibration problems use this tech.
There you go. Well, that's
So I didn't need to create a validation for that.
The evidence was in the market.
The evidence is in the market. And I mean, we've done that mining site in New Guinea on a micro hard disk testing machine out in the middle of the bush on a drilling platform.
Yes.
This thing worked.
Yes. I think what some people don't know is that we build turntables, but we also do projects for people that are vibrational. Vibrational problems and challenges.
Yeah.
We help solve them, and so this is one of the technologies that we use.
So it works in real world environments. It's not hocus pocus. It's actually a bona fide, trusted device in those other difficult and challenging environments. It turns out audio is probably the most challenging environment because of the critical listening that occurs. So remembering back to the time in WA, Western Australia, at one of the universities there, the beam collider. It's a very large frame, steel girders on Firestone airbag suspension systems with self-leveling monitoring, pump systems. Even with that suspension system, they have to ask everybody in the facility, in the complete facility, to stand still while they're taking a shot on the cement.
And this is even people that are a few floors up or in
on the stairwells.
They've got they literally announce it over the speaker system.
So
and everyone has to stop.
Their suspension system is not good enough for that. In the home environment, it's actually noisier because we've got the bass going into the room from the loudspeakers, often augmented with subwoofers. A six-pack of subwoofers or infrasonics from Wilson Badesh or something like that.
Or some people that we've met with a 24-pack.
With a 24-pack. They pressurise the room. Everything's vibrating. And that is where the lowest natural frequency comes into play because it starts isolating at the earliest possible point. as in terms of performance, when looking out, the challenge was comparing apples with apples, which we've mentioned. They tend to publish nomograms, is what we call them. They're a little chart, and I drew one up a little bit earlier.
This is something I prepared earlier.
Yeah, here's one I've prepared earlier. I'm sure we'll have a better image than this, but effectively, this is your frequency, so from 0 to 100 hertz, and this is the amount of energy and reduction of energy around a 0 point. So this bump here is the natural frequency, and here we've got it around about 0.5 hertz, and that 0.5 hertz is actually being disturbed by 0.5, but at 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, it's already isolating, and then below that, rapidly attenuating the vibration. Comparison to an air system, you're looking at 20 to 40 times.
And of course, you want that curve to be as close to that axis as possible, as close to zero as possible.
Close to zero at this point here on the x-axis as possible. So,
that's very helpful. Now, before we talk about listening impressions, because that's something that I'd love to discuss with you, now we're all kind of really waiting to hear what is the natural frequency of the
this
-K.
can get as low as 0.3 hertz.
That's incredible, 0.3.
Zero gravity would be 0 hertz.
Yeah, that really is incredible.
So it's like it's floating in space.
And
that's what impressed me about this device when I first read about it in the early 2000s. In fact, I remember ringing up an international call. We didn't have the WhatsApps and so on, and for free calls. And connected with Dr. David Platis, who was the principal of the business, and it's his invention and patents and everything, and explained the problem that I had, and he was confident that the device that he was using, which mind you was a lot bigger at the time, they hadn't miniaturized a lot of the componentry on them, would provide a solution. And it was enough for me to invest in the product at the time, and then like it so much that we became the local support group for the -K technology.
Absolutely.
In industry. So,
absolutely.
It's something when you occasionally come across something so impressive in terms of what it does, that what's that Remington saying? You liked it so much you bought the company.
Well, we didn't actually buy the company, but we're very big admirers and users of it. Now, I want to talk a little bit about listening, because when we first discovered the -K and we placed it under my turntable, the first thing that I noticed, and it was immediate, was the bass completely changed.
Yeah, it does.
The way I would describe it is, I thought the bass that I had in my system was okay, a little bit of overhang, a little bit of bloat.
I'd say that,
but I thought it was okay. And as soon as we put a -K platform under the turntable, I realized, in fact, that was not great. The bass wasn't great. So the first thing was that the bass became tighter and faster. It didn't lose any energy, but it just became more articulate. And then the next thing I noticed was that there was more detail in the bass. And people may ask, what's detail in the bass mean? Low frequencies. But I guess what I'm hearing is tonality within the bass. So the bass is the foundation of every note. And if it's just a thud, thud, thud sound, every note starts with the same foundation. However, with this system, the bass started having its own shape and sound, little tonal inflections within the bass. So the whole note became quite different. Just changed the whole music.
Yeah, so that is evidence that before the device doing its magic, there was an interference occurring, which was masking that band of frequencies, creating an overlay whilst not unpleasant, not there on the source and not there at the original recording. So
Well,
it's a device that if you want fidelity to the original, then you've got to start attacking the problem with true isolation systems. Now, what I mean by true isolation is if you were to use spikes or cones or balls in
cups,
and those sorts of things, they will change vibration pathways. They will attenuate energy and damp it, but they're not isolating. The ball in a cup can actually do isolation in a horizontal plane because it's freely moving and at a low frequency in the larger systems. So it still doesn't get as low as a minus K. So I think all things considered, the reason why we selected this technology is it's proven performance.
Well, putting all the graphs aside, if I said to you, Mark, where's the evidence for your decision? The evidence is pretty much in every high-end laboratory in the world. Pretty much.
It's not.
It's what they're putting under their very sensitive devices.
It brooks no argument. And we get called in periodically to provide a solution where the other systems are no longer able to deliver. And that to me makes me confident that we're on the right track with this technology. If there's a new technology that comes out in the future that beats this performance, then we would look at implementing that. But right now,
this is the best that you're aware of.
We implemented this in 2015. It's 10 years on and still haven't found something that works.
And people do come to us with ideas and technologies that they've invented, but we still haven't found anything quite as good as this.
Other turntable manufacturers have adopted the technology too, which is further validation that the minus K system is right up there with the very, very best possible solutions.
Well, before you were talking about electron microscopes needing complete isolation. And you said, but the audio environment at home can be even more challenging. The first thing I thought was, how can it be more challenging than an electron microscope? But really what we're talking about is that the reproduction of music, it's half science, half art in some cases.
And most laboratories don't have big subwoofers pumping bass energy into the room.
Well, but in my opinion, the science informs the art in some ways. Because if you can take the best available technology that's available in the world or available to you to solve a problem, then you're giving the music the best chance of emotionally connecting with you.
That's proven time and again.
It's fantastic. That's awesome. Really, really good explanation, Mark. Thank you.